Welcome to episode 20 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. On Stageworthy, I interview people who make theater, actors, directors, playwrights, and more, and talk to them about everything from why they chose the theater to their work process and anything in between. Alysa Pires is a dancer choreographer. Her latest work, Exterminating Angel, will premiere at this summer's Toronto Fringe Festival and just launched a crowdfunding campaign on Fund What You Can. You can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you like what you hear, I hope you'll subscribe on iTunes or Google Music or whatever podcast app you use, and consider leaving a comment or rating. You are a dancer choreographer, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Is dance something that has always been a part of your life? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Yeah, I can't remember making a decision to pursue it or making a decision to want to join. It was something that my parents put me in as a kid. They put me in a lot of sports and different activities and stuff as a child. But dance was the one thing that I guess I never complained about going. And there's videos of me at Disneyland as a 2-year-old dancing around and waiting because I couldn't go on the rides that my older brother could go on, and just dancing and never being bored and my parents said that I would just shut myself in my room and just spend hours in there by myself dancing. They put up a mirror to this day in my childhood bedroom. There was a giant mirror on one of the walls and a little homemade bar that my dad made. And I would just spend forever in there. And I think that's where the choreographic side of it came from too, because I was taking classes. I mean, they had me in classes at my local studio. But it was really the time spent by myself dancing that I feel like I kind of fell in love with making my own movement. It was just always kind of a given that I was going to continue on and try to pursue a professional career. Like I said, I'd never felt like I made a choice.
Do you know at what point it became obvious, like when you realized that it was something that you would do as a living as opposed to something that you just did to pass time or just to do?
My parents never told me that I couldn't do it or that it wasn't a viable career option or anything like that. So it never felt like I didn't know that it could be a career. I was obsessed with Gene Kelly. He was my first crush, and I loved all those old movies. And it was my mom, actually, both my parents were, they're recently retired, but they were public school teachers. And my mom was a drama teacher and did the musical theater. And I was in one of her shows. I was Tootie in Meet Me in St. Louis when I was 6 years old. And so theater and the arts I always understood that it was a career. I know a lot of people who didn't know that they could pursue theater or dance as a career until they were a little bit older, but it was always it was always clear to me that was something that I could do for the rest of my life and hopefully get paid for it. And I mean, with dance, you kind of have to start training seriously as a kid. And so my mom says that she had a moment of realizing that I would, that I had the talent to pursue it when I was about 10. But to me, there was never that moment or never a decision. It was always just a given.
You mentioned Gene Kelly and some of those old movies. Do you remember what the first of those old movies that you saw with the singing and dancing was?
The one that comes to mind is Singing in the Rain, just because it's one of my mom's favorites, and is one of mine as well. I remember watching An American in Paris and some of his other movies as a kid, but Singing in the Rain was kind of, I think we had the VHS of it. Yeah, so that one was big for me. Oh, I also became obsessed with Meet Me in St. Louis because I was in the show. So that movie, although there's not a huge amount of dance in that movie, but just like old movie musicals, and I like the old Newsies original movie with Christian Bale, and yeah, that was kind of my thing as a kid, was renting those movies. And we used to be able to rent a bunch of Cirque du Soleil shows they had done recordings of, and our local movie store had them. I come from a pretty small town, so I don't know why they had the Cirque du Soleil videos, but I used to watch those all the time too.
Well, it's actually because, if you have a small like mom and pop video store or video rental place, I think the selection was better there than at a Blockbuster.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Where Blockbuster only had new releases and some of the quote unquote family favorites.
Right.
And so you would almost never find anything except for stuff that was like a big hit. So you need like that mom and pop place where they've just got shelves and shelves and shelves of stuff that they love, or that they know that people love, or that people might love.
Yeah.
Did you go to school for dance?
I did. Yeah, I went to Ryerson. So I'm originally from BC. And then I moved to Toronto to attend Ryerson. I was in their dance program at the theater school there for 4 years. I graduated in 2012 and stayed in Toronto after that. So we're coming up on 8 years that I've been in Toronto, which is, it seems like 15 years in some ways, and it seems like 15 seconds in others.
What was it like for you? What was the thought about moving from BC to Toronto for dance? Was it something you were frightened by, excited by, both?
I was really ready to go. I actually graduated high school a year early. I was pretty set on moving on, and I felt like I was ready in my dance life and in my personal life. I was ready for more and something different, and so I was really excited to go. I think I don't really think I was scared. I'm actually getting married this summer, but my fiance and I were together then, and we moved to Toronto together. So having him with me and him making that move from our hometown to Toronto at the exact same time was comforting and kind of eased all my fears about being in a new city. But I really loved discovering the city for myself. It was the first time I ever was in a place where somebody wasn't showing me around. It was mine to discover. And I remember getting my first Metro Pass and just riding the streetcars to learn all the names of the streets, because on the subway you don't hear all the in-between streets or get to see them. So
you don't get to see them, which is, the streetcar is a great way to figure out, where you are and where everything is.
Yeah. And just to have a sense of how all of the neighborhoods relate to each other too, and how they are in proximity to each other. So yeah, I loved that. Yeah. And I loved the multicultural aspect of Toronto. I love how many different types of people and different types of food and different types of art and music and whatever. There's just so much compared to coming from a small town that is, I grew up just outside of Victoria, and Victoria is not super small, but the community that I grew up in outside of Victoria is very small, and everybody, it's just small. So there's not as many options, or there's not as many things going on. And I think I love where I grew up, and I always enjoy going home and seeing my family. And I miss them, and I miss the ocean, and I miss the mountains and the forests and all of that. But I know that the life that I want to live and the life that I'm supposed to live is in a bigger city.
Yeah.
So Toronto is perfect for that at this point.
You're working on a show for the Toronto Fringe Festival. It's a dance show.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the show is called Exterminating Angel, and it's based on Louis Buñuel's surrealist film, The Exterminating Angel. It's basically about, most people don't recognize the title, but when I tell them the plot, they recognize it. It's a pretty well-known film, and it's about a group of wealthy dinner guests who first, they're coming together for this very fancy evening, and it's pretty evident early on that something's not quite right. All of the servants and the staff of the house are basically, look like they're jumping off a sinking ship. They're all running and they're all leaving and they're all trying to get out. And by the end of the night, I mean, it's a surrealist film, so a bunch of weird stuff happens, but by the end of the night, they find that they can't leave the room. And they're not physically trapped. There's nothing in their way, but they just are psychologically trapped. They can't leave. And so what was a very pompous and pretentious gathering starts to disintegrate as they are struggling to find just basic necessities like food and water, and they start to lose their marbles a little bit. So the piece that we're making for Fringe is a full-length dance work. It's a contemporary dance theater, I would say. It is not necessarily strictly narrative as far as, these are the characters and these are their names and this is how they all relate to each other, but it's an adaptation of those themes from that film. And so there's a cast of 9 dancers, and which is quite large. Most contemporary dance pieces, just because of the budgets that we work with, often we are not able to have that many dancers. So 9 is quite big. And we have an original score being composed by Adam Sakiyama, who is other than my fiance, he's a Toronto-based composer, and he works in online media and musical theater, and does lots of different composing. And so yeah, he is making a new score for us. So it's exciting. It's definitely a lot of work, but I'm excited for audiences to be able to see it, and hopefully for some non-dance audiences to be able to take a chance on our show, because Fringe is a really great opportunity to do that when the tickets are very affordable and there's, the shows are quick and there's so much going on. We really hope that some people who maybe have never seen any dance before, or maybe have an idea of what they think contemporary dance looks like, or maybe they've seen dance before and they had a bad experience, or maybe they love dance and are a huge fan. We're hoping that we can reach out to all of those people and create a show that is athletic and physical in its movement, but also really intimate and tender in its humanity.
What would you say to somebody who was, if not averse to dance ignorant? What would you say to somebody to convince them to see your show in particular, or a dance show in general?
Right. I think the number one thing, especially with contemporary dance, is that people have this feeling that they just don't get it. They don't get it. they want it to be less abstract, or they want it to be more clear, or whatever they want. They feel like sometimes everyone's understanding it and they're not. And that can be really alienating. But what I would say to those people is that that's really not important. Understanding exactly what the choreographer meant in each moment is not important at all, really. In the way that when you look at an abstract painting, you can find your own interpretation of it, or you can see your own imagery in it. My argument all the time to people who are maybe a little bit nervous about seeing dance is that we as people communicate with our bodies every day. What is that saying? There's 90% of communication is nonverbal. We use our bodies constantly, our body language, we point, we gesture. We all know what it feels like to reach for something. We all know what it feels like to have the wind knocked out of you, to get bad news and feel like you can't breathe, or to be so excited that you have this physical reaction, or being so upset or so angry. We communicate and experience movement in our bodies every single day. And what I would say to those people is to use your knowledge of how your own body interacts with the world and view dance through that lens. So you don't need to perfectly interpret every moment the way the choreographer intended it to. What most choreographers intend is for you to just have some sort of reaction, some sort of feeling, whether it's of being impressed by the athleticism and the physicality of the movement, whether it is relating to a specific gesture or relating to a specific feeling, or just being moved by the emotion of the work, whatever it is, being able to just use your life experience and use that lens of view everything through the lens of your own experience, which is what we do when we see any type of theater. But I think with dance, for some reason, people just want it to be clear. And I would say to those people that you have all of the tools that you need to be able to have your own reaction. And whether that is clear or not, or whether that is what the choreographer intended or not, doesn't matter.
I happen to be one of those people who is when I go to a dance show at Fringe, which is usually where I end up seeing dance for the most part. I find myself struggling to see what the narrative is, even if there isn't clearly a narrative. As somebody who myself is a storyteller, I'm always looking for the narrative.
So that's your lens.
That's my lens, and I sometimes with a dance show, I find it difficult to find it. That's not. I mean, that I know that's my failing. As far as an audience member, what I need to do, what I should, I think, do, is learn to just sort of accept it for what I'm seeing and try to take it in and interpret it later. But I find it very difficult to turn that part of my brain off.
But I would also say there are many different types of dance, and each choreographer is different. And so if you are somebody that likes to be able to find the story, maybe there is a different choreographer or a different type of contemporary dance that would be more suited to you. I think for some reason dance gets all lumped together in the way that if you went to go see a play that was very dark and maybe a little bit abstract, and then you went to go see a comedy that was very realistic and true to life, you would never say that those were the same thing, and people would come out of it and go, they wouldn't say, oh, I hate plays. They would say, oh, I hate comedies, or I hate dark, whatever. Where with dance, a lot of people come out and they just go, I hate dance. So that's it. I'm never going to another dance show without really. And I know it's because the volume is so much less. The dance shows at Fringe are a very small portion. So, that a lot of people just aren't exposed to dance in the same way that they are to theater. But yeah, I would challenge audiences, even if you say you see a dance show at Fringe, hopefully you come see our show. I hope you don't hate it, but if you do, if you leave a dance show and you didn't like it or you didn't get it, I would challenge those audience members to try one more and try to find one that seems, through the descriptions or through maybe any teasers that you're seeing online, seems totally opposite. And then see how you do with that. Just because everybody is so different. I think I would describe our show as being highly physical and being very athletic, and maybe on a more technical contemporary ballet, in a technical contemporary ballet way in some moments, where there might be other. I don't know. I know some of the artists who are making other dance shows for Fringe, but I haven't seen their pieces yet, so I don't want to speak for them, but some of them might be more pedestrian, or some of them might be a totally different style. Some of them might use text. Some of them might have live music. It's all so different. And I think my personal mission with Fringe, obviously I want people to see our show. I want people to come and I want people to enjoy it. But my overarching mission is just to get people to see more dance. And hopefully, whether it's our show or another Fringe dance show, just hopefully build a bigger audience for the other 50 weeks of the year. Because is
this your first Toronto Fringe?
This is my first Toronto Fringe, yes.
Have you? Because I know, in my experience, it looks sometimes like, okay, first off, in most Fringe festivals, it is hard to get your voice heard.
Yeah, there's so
much, and it's hard in some ways to get your voice heard as a dance show.
Absolutely.
Do you feel like? You've spoken about dance generally getting up together. Do you have a plan for getting your voice and your show, getting attention for your show a little more, or are you more interested in like getting the dance in general, raising the profile of dance in general at Fringe?
Both. Absolutely. Yeah. I want people to just go see dance, but of course I want people to see our show. And if you see one dance show at Fringe, obviously I would love it to be ours. But, sorry, there's a fly buzzing around my face. I want, both. I do want people to see more dance. Of course, I want people to come see our show. And I would be lying if I said, oh, I'm fine if they go see another dance show instead of ours. I've spoken to a couple of the other dance artists in Fringe this year, and we are trying to work together to help promote each other's shows and to be really supportive of each other in that way. I am also trying to connect with a lot of other artists who are not doing dance shows and seeing how we can, do ad swaps in our programs, or how we can help support each other. And I think being strategic about what shows I'm reaching out to, by way of it being shows that I think are similar, although they're not dance shows, maybe their audience would be interested in, if they were going to go see a dance show, they'd be interested in the type of dance work that we are doing. So, it's a huge, I think it's the struggle of every Fringe show.
That is very true.
And dances maybe even more so. But yeah, so I'm working very diligently to make sure that I'm taking every opportunity for our show to be featured, and for just because we're a dance work, not to be left out or not to be under the radar at all. So, I mean, that's a pretty big undertaking as the choreographer of the show and the producer of the show to be trying to do all of that as well. But it's something that I feel really passionately about. So, yeah, I hope people come. But we're working our brains out to make the show as good as it possibly can be, and then also to raise the profile and to be involved with as many other fringe activities. I think sometimes dance can be a little bit segregated just because as dancers, we're not as connected through the fringe community as maybe theater artists would be. I think in my cast, maybe only a handful, maybe even just one or two of the dancers have been in fringe shows before. Mm-hmm. This is my first time being involved in a Toronto Fringe show. The composer for our show has composed before for Fringe in the past, and even just as a composer, he's been way more involved and knows that many more people just because it's I feel like it's more part of the theater community than it is the dance community.
Yeah. It's so important when you're doing Fringe to be involved in, like, to make sure that you are, at the Fringe tent and meeting people and seeing stuff and seeing so much of it. And I think that a lot of theater people don't do enough going to dance, to be honest with you. And I mean, I know that I find the same. It's hard. I think what I was saying before the technical issues began, which might not make any sense to anybody who missed the part that I'm about to edit out. I think I was saying, actually, do you remember what I was saying? Because I may have forgotten.
You were saying that it's important to go see other shows.
It is important to see other shows. And I think that, I know for me, there's the pressure, the Fringe pressure of seeing the shows that all your friends are in, and while also trying to see stuff and expand your theatrical palette, as it were, just to get out and see a little bit more than usual. Right. It's definitely hard to get outside of that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I have a question there.
No, I think it's a good point. And I think it's tougher for people in the theater community because the volume is just that much greater, and it's more integrated into the community in that way, where the dance shows are a lot less. So for our community, there's only a handful of shows to see anyway. Mm-hmm. And if you know anybody, there you go. They're pretty much going to be in just those shows. But so I am certainly going to be working to see everything I can outside of, as well as the dance shows, and hopefully challenging other people to do so as well on both sides of that. Mm.
You're not currently in Toronto, are you?
I am not. I am sitting on the living room floor at my grandmother's house in Kelowna.
And are you preparing for your show out there?
We just had some rehearsals. I'm actually away for all of May. I am adjudicating a couple of different dance competitions and planning my wedding, which is this August, and I'm attending a family wedding. So it was a trip that was planned prior to us getting into Fringe. Mm-hmm. So we auditioned for the show, which was super exciting because there aren't a lot of open call auditions for contemporary dance work in Toronto. So we had to split the audition into two. Between the two live auditions and some video submissions, we had over 150 people audition for 8 contracts. We have 9 dancers, but one of them was already cast. So yeah, it was crazy, and it was awesome to see that kind of interest and that kind of energy in the room. And it's tough. I mean, to have to see that many talented people and have to say no, because it's just the reality of it. But it was a really amazing experience. I was very humbled by it, to see that many people come out. But that was in February. So we did that in February, and my company produced another show in March. So we did that first. And then right when that was done, we started rehearsing for Fringe, and we had rehearsals throughout the last month. And then I'm gone, and it is my administrative month. So I am taking care of all of the marketing and publicity stuff that I can do, connecting with people and trying to set up things just like this. And we also are going to be launching our crowdfunding campaign in just a couple of days.
Cool.
And so that will be happening while I'm away. So it's going to be a very busy time. The composer is currently writing the music for the show as well. So we are very much talking through all of that. Once I'm back at the beginning of June, we will be going into an intensive rehearsal period where we're together 4 days a week, and finishing up the show. And by finishing up, I mean making the show at that point when I'm back in June. So it's kind of a different thing for Fringe, because, you know, they want to help us promote the show. So they're like, they're asking very specific questions about it. And and a lot of it is still up in the air, because that's how dance works are made. They're, unless you're doing a remount, you're making it in the room. I can't write a script at 2:00 in the morning when I feel inspired. I have to wait until I'm in a room with bodies. And so that's I guess a unique aspect to creating a dance work, is that I can't just send somebody a script and say, hey, can you read through this, or can you learn this, and we'll start rehearsals next week or whatever. So it's a challenge, but it's also the exciting part about what we do, is that it lives in the dancers' bodies day to day. I mean, I film everything on my phone, and that's helpful for the composer, and that's helpful for us for our memories, but it really is within the bodies of the dancers. And as the movement becomes more settled and it becomes more consistent, the challenge then becomes to bring back the immediacy and bring back that feeling of it being for the first time, which is something that I think all performers struggle with. But because of the physical nature, we want the movement to be really settled in their bodies. But at the same time, to have that energy of it being the first time. So, and as things change, what details are we retaining and what details are we kind of letting go of? It's always funny to watch the old rehearsal videos once the show is set, because there's inevitably things that have fallen by the wayside, and small details that didn't seem important at first that are now the highlight of that moment. So, we will be, this is admin month, and then we're going back into our intensive creative period in June.
I'm curious about the process, or your process of composing, or choreographing, because I mean, in my mind, and I'm sure in a lot of people's minds, dance comes from the music, and I think that, you know, it's hard to choreograph without it, but it sounds like you're sort of like getting a sense of it without the music. Or what is the process of creating a show like this like?
I think for me personally, every piece is different. Sometimes the music comes first, and I'm very inspired by that and wanting to make something that really is linked to the music in that way. And sometimes it's something else entirely. So for this show, it's images and moments particularly moments that I've been inspired by the movie, or thoughts or concepts of how those themes from the film could physically translate. And sometimes I get images. So for this show, I had an instant image of what the first moment of the piece would be, which is always a good sign to me if I know what the opening is and I feel strongly about it. So I'm not going to give it away.
No, please don't.
But,
please don't.
I had a very clear image of what the opening of the piece would be. And so normally the way it happens is we come into the studio and I say to the dancers, okay, this is kind of my thought for this moment. And a lot of the time I'll say, so maybe I think it starts like this or something like this. And we use their improvisations and their input as well. So a lot of the time, especially when we're making partnering work, I'll say, where does it feel like you can go next, or what's your impulse? Does it feel like you want to go this way or that way, or what's the impulse? And then based on that, sometimes I'll go, yes, that's exactly it. Okay, what's next? And sometimes I'll go, no, maybe not. And so it depends on what the moment needs. A lot of the time, because I'm not physically going to be performing the piece, and the movement has to live in the bodies of the dancers. So especially with partnering or with big physical lifts and stuff like that, it's less about me going, okay, now your left arm is going to go exactly here and your right arm is going to do this. And it's more about me saying, I think her body goes up this way and then her leg kind of does that, and you catch her this way and maybe it makes this image. And then the dancers very much are figuring it out with me. And so there's a huge amount of trial and error, mostly error, but that's the fun. And then occasionally when we're making more phrase work, so something that would be in unison or something that is more specific, a lot of the time we are still making it collaboratively in that way that I'm going, what's next? Maybe it's something like this, but I'm dictating more the specifics in that moment. There's at the beginning of our show, not the very beginning, not the opening image, but near the beginning of our show, there's a unison sequence of gesture. That's supposed to represent the formality, the dinner party, the pomp and all of that. And so the gestures are very specific. And so we are working on them together. But in that case, I have to say, no, I need your left hand exactly here. And then in the bigger stuff, it's really the dancer's input as much as mine. Sometimes I see very specific images, like the dancer is connected to the other dancer in this way, or there's I think it's a turn and then this happens. And sometimes it's just a feeling, or it's just I think this character has this relationship, or something happens to them in this way. And so the music, we often play music in rehearsal just for the vibe or the kind of the ambiance of what that moment is going to be. And then that for the composer becomes kind of a temp track for him to think, okay, this is the tempo that she wants, or this is for the gesture sequence. It's a waltz. It's a 3/4, and we've choreographed it to that. And so the music that he is writing is not the same as what we've been using in rehearsal, but it's the same tempo and it's a waltz. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that I feel very fortunate to be able to work with him and to say, I liked it better when it was the oboe instead of the flute, or this tempo actually, for the dancers, it needs to be a little bit faster, or it needs to be a little bit slower, or whatever. So that's a luxury that a lot of people don't have. And so I'm very fortunate for that. It also helps that we don't have to pay any royalties or anything like that on the music.
Is this your first time working with your fiance in this way, or is this, yeah?
No, he's composed for me many times before. This is the largest scale project we've done together. He's written music for shorter works for me, and he's done a lot of more sound design for me as well, where I have a piece of music and then but I kind of want this effect, and then I want this to happen. And so he does a lot of that type of stuff for me as much as he does original composition. So it'll be kind of a blend of both. I mean, everything will be his, but the, not all of it is super melodic.
So you're currently off in BC doing your admin month. How much time in terms of hours goes into putting this show together once you're into your intense rehearsal period? How many hours a day, how many days a week are you working here until the Fringe at the beginning of July?
Our physical rehearsals, when we will be actually in the studio with the dancers, we're doing, currently what we have scheduled is 4 days a week for 4 hours each day. And that's not always with all of the dancers, sometimes working with just a soloist or just on a specific section. That's just the creative side. And then I'll go home and I'll do all the admin and also be fine-tuning the score with the composer and all of that. So for me, certainly, I imagine that I will be working for 8 to 10 hours a day on the show, but physically in the rehearsal with the dancers, it's just those, I guess, 16 hours a week.
You were saying that you videotape everything. When you get back from your rehearsal, are you reviewing the video and making notes and changes, or is it do you go with your instinct in the room more than the video?
A lot of the time I'll watch the video kind of obsessively until the next rehearsal, and it'll just give me an idea of maybe where to go next, or maybe some edits that I want to make. But and it's also good for the dancers too to see. Where we rehearse primarily doesn't have a mirror, which is kind of unusual for dance. But that's just the space I have a residency at. So I kind of love it, because not when we're doing the super detailed gesture, that's helpful to have a mirror, but I love it because the dancers really are right away using their eyes inside of the movement, because there isn't that temptation to look away or just to check in. So they're instantly already invested in the focus of the piece, which most professional dancers do right away anyway, but there's just not that temptation. So I Dropbox all of the videos to the dancers so that they also have the opportunity to watch it. Because a lot of the time, especially if there's, 9 bodies in the room, I can't be watching everybody the whole time. And so sometimes they'll watch the video and go, oh my gosh, I was using the wrong arm there, or I was doing something totally different, or the angle of that, or I think their lift is better because they do this, we should try to do that. So it's a helpful tool. And especially because obviously I would love to have way more rehearsal time with the dancers. I would have loved to have been working on this show for the past year full time. So it's a helpful tool in the short amount of time that we have together for them to be able to do some of that research on their own, and just being able to come back in the next day with a deepened perspective of what we are working on.
That's really cool. Now, do you have a web presence for your company and your show?
Yeah. So, in my admin month, I'm going to be revamping my website, but my website, which is also the company website, is just alysapires.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/AlysaPiresDance. And we're on Instagram at Alysa Pires, on Twitter at Alysa Pires. And we are going to be, I don't have the link right now for our Fund What You Can campaign, but that will be coming up very shortly in the next couple of days. But that can be found on our Facebook page as well. We did a really awesome promo photo shoot. My fiance actually also is a very talented photographer, which is helpful for me. So yeah, yes. So he took these amazing pictures at the Clay and Paper Theater space, which unfortunately I believe is no longer. And so yeah, I haven't released all of those photos yet. So if you like our Facebook page, you'll be able to see all of those amazing photos as they come out. And all of our little updates and teasers that we will be releasing between now and the show.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Alysa.
Thank you so much for talking to me. I'm glad we were able to chat. And hopefully, as someone who's a little bit scared of dance, hopefully we've eased that fear just slightly.
I think you have.
Cool. That's my main goal.
Great.